My mother did indeed encourage me to learn Kathak when I was a 4-year-old, and I loved, dressing up in costume and wearing my mother's jewelry and putting on some makeup and dancing and whirling and learning. I loved all that. But my mother also later told me that, look, there is an element of music that you must learn. Once I started learning music, I was so fascinated by it that I felt that this is what I would prefer to do.
In the last 40 years that you've performed, governments have come and gone. Have you seen any one particular government or anything, any organization really truly help the arts?
There's a kind of Cavalier attitude towards the arts. It's like a non-essential. Declare it non-essential. Don't do anything about it.
Hi everybody, this is Just Kiran from Indian Express, and with me is Padma Shri Shubha Mudgal ji, and she's here in Chandigarh for the Elsewhere Foundation for Rang Hori, and she'll be singing compositions on Basant and Holi. And we are really glad to have her here because she's performing almost after a decade over here, although she's been coming regularly before that, and we hope that she comes more often after this. Musician, musicologist, composer, writer, multi-talented, multifaceted. Shubha ji, how do you manage all this?
I think the best description for me would be that I'm a student of music and would like to remain a student all my life long, because there's so much to discover, so much to explore, so much to learn, and so much to listen. So I think mine has been a wonderful journey in the companionship of music, and there could be no better companion.
I was reading somewhere that, initially your parents, your mother had put you in Kathak.
Yes.
And somehow Kathak was left behind and music began. So how did that transition occur? And do you still follow Kathak?
Again, once again, because of my mother. So my mother did indeed encourage me to learn Kathak when I was a 4-year-old, and I loved, dressing up in costume and wearing my mother's jewelry and putting on some makeup and dancing and whirling and learning. I loved all that. But my mother also later told me that, look, there is an element of music that you must learn to be able to be a good dancer as well. And she was also pointing to that aspect of abhinay and thumri singing that is so much a part of Kathak. And she encouraged me to start taking lessons in vocal music as to complement what I was already learning in dance. Once I started learning music, I was so fascinated by it that I felt that this is what I would prefer to do.
How important was your mother in the journey? Because you keep mentioning your parents, especially your mother. How important is for any girl or lady or woman, for her mother to initiate her into the world, make her strong, independent, and initiate her into the arts?
I give absolute full marks to my mother, and I cannot thank her enough for the support that she provided and the guidance that she, not just the support, I mean, mothers can tend to be doting mothers as well. Mine wasn't. But she was a true guide, as was my father. But definitely my mother was the one who pointed out, I think, even to my father, that I was happiest when I was doing music. And that was what I was naturally drawn to. For her to have seen that, possibly to have discussed it with my father, I don't know. And for them to have come to the conclusion that after my graduation, they should give me a year off to make an independent decision, guided albeit by them. That, do I want to continue joining a postgraduate course in some subject that I want to study, or do I want to study music and make that make a full-time commitment to music? I think those were things that she really propelled in many ways. And I'm truly grateful to her that she was able to not just see that this is what I would have wanted to do, but also help me make a choice. I mean, I wouldn't even have thought of it maybe. I would have felt that, heavens, how can I study only music? I think the fact that she just gave me that option, and throughout my life, she gave me those options, So whether it was, let's say, performing, going to various places, facing challenges, coming back and telling my mother that I'm scared, going on my own, and my mother saying, well, you have to make a decision. Is this what you want to do? How long are you going to be chaperoned, So take independent decisions and see how you want to face these challenges. Don't sit around and whine. I think those are very important life lessons.
And I was speaking with Anishji also. You're a first generation musician, and you've chosen to pick thumri and khayal dadra. And thumri was also the music of the courtesans.
Yes.
And they used to perform. Not women were not allowed to perform earlier. How was it to shatter that glass ceiling, and in a time go and perform, and in front of huge crowds, thumri, and in a country where women performers were far in between at that time. So how did you face those challenges of traveling, performing, and in a art form which was earlier considered only for a certain section, and then it grew?
Well, there are certain challenges that continue to date. For example, the kind of semi-classical status that has unnecessarily and unjustifiably been given to Thumri Dadra because of its association with a certain section of society. So that challenge continues. People still seem to think it's some kind of frivolous thing, which it isn't. It's not a frivolous form.
No.
It is an extremely difficult, delicate, nuanced form, and as classical. What do you mean semi? I mean, this is not about being half classical. It is as much based on the foundation of rag and tal as khayal or dhrupad. So I think those challenges remain, and they will not go easily, however much I might object. For me, the challenge is how to prove that this is indeed correct. And that can only be done through the music. So those challenges I continue to face. But also I must acknowledge that the acceptance that I have received from society came from the contribution of many others. Women musicians whose work was so splendid that they may have come from any strata of society, but when they sat down to sing, they were masters of their form. Whether it was a person like Kesarbai Kerkar, whom I never learned from, but she could demand. There are anecdotes about her where she ticked off chief ministers and very powerful people who just at the thought of their disturbing her performance. So, when there are great path-breaking musicians like that, women musicians, things become easier for people who follow. There were others who studied music with all the seriousness that was required for a professional singer, but who didn't make it their profession. So in a sense, they remained amateur, but they were from families that were not Khandani families. They were not from families of courtesans. People like, let's say, one of Mogubai Kurdikar's disciples, Kausalya Manjeshwar, who not only was a very accomplished musician, but she also took an active stand in creating a better environment for artists. She was the one who led a strike against All India Radio because of their audition policy. So women like her, who were not from Khandani families, but who chose to study music with all the gravity and seriousness that is required, and who also actively engaged in improving the ecosystem, such ladies really made life much easier for people like me.
So are you inspired by them? Because when you discussed about how you helped artists during pandemic, we'd like to talk about that. And you genuinely are very generous and caring, and you show a lot of compassion towards your fellow artists. Usually, artists are perceived to be a little selfish also, a little arrogant कि मैं क्यों help करूँ किसी की, मेरा कला कम हो जाएगा, है ना? But where does that generosity come from? Where does that that daleri to help people? Is it because of your predecessors or the examples you've seen, or this is something that you're born with it or learned?
No, I mean, I'm very conscious of the fact that today, if in today's program, I was to come without Anish and Sudhir and sing only with my tanpura, how would the audience react to it? And when they are there with me, what happens to the music? Their immense contribution to the music is apparent. I would be not only dishonest, but a complete coward if I didn't accept that. The contribution that their skill, talent, wisdom is making to my performance only adds to it. Why then would I cringe about acknowledging that? So I think it's about, you have to be imandar, na? You have to accept that the other person is bringing something.
Adding value.
Adding so much. so many ideas, so much to the sonic feel of the concert also. So many things they are contributing. They're actually helping you. Why would I not help?
And you want to
that?
help others also? Like this thought during pandemic, I think you were one of the few people who were sensitive to the idea or the thing that there is someone who needs help.
You know, at home also, all of us, that's the three of us, Anish, Sudhir and me, we have been brought up in a certain way to be responsible citizens. And also our gurus. For example, I can share with you that one of the great people I learned from, Pandit Jitendra Abhisheki ji, set up a trust with funds that he collected from his earnings as a musician. He set them aside to help aging, ailing musicians on one condition that would never be announced publicly. How noble is this? Now, when you come from a parampara like that, how can you not be bothered?
Did you continue with the crowdfunding? So, ma'am, during pandemic, with Anish ji and 4 more individuals, started a crowdfunded program for a month. It was on, and they benefited around 137 families of artists across 10 states benefited from that.
Yes.
So, financially, are you continuing with that kind of work?
We don't have, the 6 of us who set this up really don't have organizations or trusts that can do that. So for everything that we do, we need to go through somebody else because we don't have.
And it's a very intrepid.
And also just imagine that if you, what did we set out to do? We set out to send money every month for 6 months to 137 families. 137 or 130 into 5 or 6. How many bank transfers is that going to be?
Yeah,
and
the math.
Yes, and can you imagine any organization doing that? Fortunately, we were able to collect the money and send it in one go. So we sent the money that we would have disbursed in 6 months all in one go.
Lump sums.
But it is not easy to get these things done. And the rules and the regulations, which change with every few months, make it even more difficult. So we have to tread with, caution, make sure that we do things by the book, and also find people who are willing to work with us. Otherwise, it's very difficult.
So most of the time, traditional musicians, classical musicians were also considered gods, a little inaccessible, and they had their own cocoon, their entire own ecosystem. But you have stepped out, and you have also diversified. You have gone into the learning, the education, the teaching, all these aspects. When did you decide, okay, I want to write a book, I want to teach children, I want to get into the education, and I want to promote music as not just classical, but as a diverse option that children or people should be sensitized to it. It does improve your personality, and it does make you a holistic, evolved human being. When did you decide that, yes, this is what I want to give back to the society and also be part of my legacy?
I think it happens quite organically and to everybody. As you go along, as you start performing, more and more people approach you to learn. And when you accept that you will teach them, that acceptance also reminds you of your responsibility as a teacher. And so you try and teach them. Sometimes you try and use the same methods that your gurus used. But then you realize that no, this student perhaps needs some special care in this area. So you try and work out ways. I think it all happens, you learn on as you go along. And about writing, we were always encouraged to read at home. We were also encouraged not just to read and just say, I've read this book, but there would be discussions on literature at my home because my parents were teachers of literature. I grew up in an area where my next door neighbor was Firak Gorakhpuri ji, who was also teaching in the English department. Across the street lived, not very far from our home, lived Mahadevi Verma ji. One of the family friends was Sumitra Nandan Pant ji. So these are great figures. And so the conversation at home very often revolved around literature and the arts and society and politics, etc. And so we grew up in that atmosphere. It was only natural that as we went along, we built our own collection of books. We built our own collection of, uh, things that we wanted to read, made our own notes, started doing research, perhaps not in a formal way, but learning more about music through reading. All of this just sort of, the more you delve, the more you find that there's more to seek.
In the last 40 years that you've performed, governments have come and gone. Have you seen any one particular government or anything, any organization really truly help the arts grow? Or is it still politics for the country? Is still the communal divide? It is still about temples and vote banks? Or is someone genuinely concerned about the artistic temperament also?
Well, look, a lot of the state-run schemes were set up decades ago and were also Nehruvian in their outlook. I mean, let's say all the academies, etc. When were they set up? They were set up
Yes.
many, many decades ago. But I think what hasn't happened, and they all do work,
Debate, yes.
which is important. However, I don't think much review has happened. What needs to be changed, I mean, nobody has sat down and discussed if policy needs to be changed. In fact, there's a kind of cavalier attitude towards the arts. It's like a non-essential. Declare it non-essential. Don't do anything about it. Or suddenly just announce schemes where either because it's G20 or whether it's because it's Amrit Mahotsav, have some way of saying that there were 7,962 performances funded by this scheme. I don't think a review is done, a careful review is done to ensure that the lives of artists and that the general
Preservation of music and the instruments.
yes, it has to be done and evaluated. Where is the evaluation? Where are the reports? Why do I need to file RTIs and not get any response? I think all of this now should be made available in public domain.
Yes.
Why is it not being done? I think transparency, review, all of this should happen. And I don't think anybody is really thinking of that.
Nothing. Women composers in the classical field, yes, they are there. But in the mainstream cinema, when we see very few names as women composers. You've composed for theatre also,
Yes.
for plays. So how do we encourage women as composers to come forth?
I don't think any special,
Like they say that women probably can't do stand-up comedy. Maybe they can't compose.
Oh, no, they're doing
it's
stand-up
a gender
comedy.
this construct also.
there are lots of...
Now they are,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think, I wouldn't say that a special effort should be made, but also remember that I'm not an insider in the world of film music. I don't know what it is that is keeping back female composers. I really don't know, because that's not my area of specialization, so I'm not too sure what it is that is holding them back. But I do know that in recent years, a few composers, women composers, have been successful marginally successful.
Speaking of Basant and Holi, there is climate change. Does it change the rags and the compositions or your mood?
I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that no, that doesn't change. In fact, very strangely, we continue to have Malhar programs right till November. So that is definitely there, and we suddenly find ourselves flooded in different cities
Yes.
when we shouldn't be. There should be no rain. But at the same time, I think it's important for me as a student of Hindustani classical music to keep revising, reviewing, and sharing this repertoire, because each of these compositions tells many, many stories about rituals, about nature, about certain customs which perhaps may not be there any longer or may not be in the mainstream any longer. And I think that it's important to keep sharing them again and again, as well as adding newer compositions.
And at one time you said that you like dealing a lot with the youngsters and
Yes.
listening to their music and incorporating technology. How has Dhaval, your son, helped you through this? And I believe he's a poker champion also.
Yes, he is. Dhaval was the first one who started saying that should we get an internet connection? And the internet really opened up a new world for me. And I'm not scared of technology, although I'm not saying that I'm very good at dealing with technology, but But computer technology and internet technology certainly are things that I've really enjoyed using. Having said that, it's not that I'm, like I still use pen and paper as well as digital notebooks and Apple pencils, etc. But yes, it's been quite a journey of discovery to be able to listen to music and to work being done across the world. At least on the internet, there aren't as many lines of controls and passport control lines as there are in the real world.
And Dhaval is, as I said, poker champion. Have you
Yes.
learned poker from him?
Not at all. I have no idea what poker is about, but he seems to be enjoying himself, and I'm happy
It was
for
quite
him.
a revelation when I
Yes.
read that. And so when you approach a concert, like today evening, what is there must be some ritual that you follow. A lot of musicians do. They'll probably take an hour quietly, they'll sit down, or they'll be in their own zone. What is your ritual of approaching music? Do you follow some techniques or some exercises or some discipline of riyaz every day or before a concert?
Yes, definitely. Singing is very much part of every day of my life. Preparing repertoire, making sure that all the compositions are accessible easily. Also, once we reach the venue, then doing a sound check so that we don't keep hollering about this not being correct,
Yes.
or tuning up, and that requires silence and also cutting off from the rest of the whatever is happening around. So at one point, yes, I like to be left in solitude and calm down, focus my concentration on tuning up and starting.
All right. And finally, Underscore Records, and you had started a Shabdkosh also for the music
Yes.
language. How is that going on?
Well, not too good. We have a wonderful sort of inventory, but not too many people are buying music, and not too many musicians are buying music even. And also, everybody expects that everything should be made available freely on social media platforms. So it's not going too well, and I'm not sure how long we can continue supporting that. As for the Shabdkosh, that too the basic work was done, but it's not something that Anish and I can do from our laptops. It requires a formal setting up of an organization with professionals involved, and we don't have the resources for that as yet.
It will take time. And so I'll leave you on that note, and also I'd want you to say a few things about music and how children can be incorporated, because with the Center Advisory Board, you wanted arts to be a part of the education program. So how do you feel that children or people can be integrated into the arts or the music, like you said, that guardians and parents need to? When should we start exposing our children to the arts?
We should start exposing them to music and the arts and even before they are born. And certainly once they are born, playing music, sharing music with them. As they grow up, they may have their own preferences. Being ready to accept their preferences and give those kinds of music a proper listening, not just a hypocritical listening. And to be able to discuss the music with them is very important. Teaching them that the music that they hear, there's diversity, there's richness, and that they should really enjoy that. They should try and familiarize themselves. That has to be taught both at home and at school.
All right, thank you, ma'am, and we'll leave her now. And we're looking forward to more music, both mainstream and classical. Until next time, and all the best for your concert.
Thank you.
Thank you.